Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Hayes IT Salary Guide 2017 webinar. We will begin shortly, but just a few housekeeping points. Everyone has been muted on entry, so please send any questions through to the Hayes WebEx host, and we will endeavor to answer them at the end of the presentation. You can get more information on this topic on our website at hayes.ca/salaryguide. And now I will pass it over to our host, Travis O'Rourke.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's joining us on today's webinar. We'll be taking a look at the results from our survey of employers and hiring managers across Canada, primarily looking at IT, but also doing some kind of cross-industry comparisons. My name is Travis O'Rourke. I'm the head of Hayes Talent Solutions here at Hayes in Canada. I started working at Hayes about 6 years ago, but I have somewhere around 12, 13 years of specific IT recruitment experience here in Canada. I'm also going to be joined by Chris David. Chris is one of our senior recruitment consultants in IT. He's based out in Alberta, so there's some regional specifications he can speak to you about. And his focus is primarily on IT security. We're going to have you today for about 25 minutes. We'll share the results of the survey and hopefully have some time at the end for questions. You can send the questions through the chat function, or you can wait till the end and we'll try and cover as many as we possibly can. Just a little bit about the survey before we start. As most of you know, we produce an annual salary guide which shows typical salaries paid across a selection of industries and functional areas. We then cross-reference them for level of experience and the type of company that the role might be found in. The salaries are based on what we see every day in the roles that we fill and from the candidates that we meet. It's become an invaluable reference tool for literally thousands of hiring managers across the country, and we're very proud of its simplicity and user-friendliness. If you'd like to receive a copy of the 2017 guide, go to hayes.ca and you can request a copy, or you can just call any local Hayes office. That works as well. In addition to the guide, we also survey clients about their hiring plans, any salary changes, general business activity forecasts, and ultimately their overall confidence in the economy. This year, we have included up to 5 years of data to show trends in the job market, and it puts us in a position to see things that others can't and really provide some advice to you, our audience, and make some pointed recommendations to you. Today's webinar, we're going to look at the general market and where the IT industry falls within that market. This year, the survey was completed by 4,000 hiring managers, HR professionals, and business leaders across Canada, and we've covered 16 different industries and 20 functional areas. But for comparison's sake, I'm going to try and pull out regional and industry differences, and we'll talk about them as we go along. Okay, I'll start with the headlines. Corporate Canada's confidence in the economic stability recovers to some extent. Business activity forecasts improve back to the 2014 levels. Hiring and compensation not expected to increase in line with business activity just yet. Recruitment, retention, and employee development efforts must be targeted to align with business. And employers are relying on temporary or contract workers for productivity, but many of them are not getting the most from these resources. Now, how is the IT job market? Business activity forecasts are expected to increase even more than this past year. Employers are hopeful that their staff levels will remain the same or increase this year. Last year, around a third saw a decrease in their permanent staff levels, which may be due to a lot more IT professionals pursuing contract roles. And employers are promoting company culture and competitive salary packages in order to attract and retain top talent. Let's take a look at this year's overall market trends. Now, when we're looking at the salary guide results, I always start with feelings about the economy in general and whether people will think it will get stronger, weaker, or stay the same. This graph shows employers' economic outlook over the last 4 years, and you can see there's been a lot of change. The dark blue line is how many people thought the economy would strengthen in the next year. The light blue is how many people think it will weaken. In 2015, we saw the most confidence yet. Almost half of people thought the economy would strengthen, and in that pink circle, you can see that more people said it would strengthen than it would stay the same. At the end of 2015, when asking about the outlook for 2016, unfortunately, as we know that confidence was hit badly by the oil price. You can see that was very bad for employer optimism with that big drop on that dark blue line. The number saying the economy would improve dropped by half in 1 year. Asking now about the outlook for 2017, and you can see a slight improvement. The dark blue line has passed 30%, so 1/3 of employers say the economy will strengthen, and the light blue line is back below 20%. It's still nowhere near where it was for 2015, but it is moving in the right direction. So what is driving this change? Is it different across different regions in Canada? If we look at the regional overview, it is mostly good news. You can see that in BC and Ontario on the left, the dark blue line stayed above the light blue for the last 3 years. So while confidence took a hit for 2016, it rebounded to some extent this year with an improvement. In BC, that's over 40% of employers saying the economy will strengthen. In Ontario, it's over 30%. Now looking at Alberta in the top right, there is a lot of change over the last 3 years. You've got the very well documented change from boom to bust shown from 2015 to 2016. Last year, almost 40% of people saying the economy would weaken. This year, that has improved by 10 points, and now under 30% saying it would continue to weaken. 20% saying it will improve, up from around 15% last year. So an improvement there as people hope that the worst is behind them and that the oil price will continue to recover. Any good news on the pipeline side is sure to help, but having said that, Alberta is still the least optimistic of all of the provinces. Go back a slide here. Now, how do IT leaders see the year ahead? Their expectations are pretty much the same. 32% say the economy will strengthen, compared to 31% on the previous slides. 17% foresee it weakening, which is the same as the overall expectations. Now, that was all about the economy in general. But how about what people are saying about their own businesses? The colors here are the same as earlier. So dark blue means that business activity increased, and where it's striped, that's the prediction for that year. So let's start with what did happen in 2016. You can see that half of employers say business activity increased, up 3 points from 2015, and 27% say it stayed the same. In shaded bars beside those figures, you can see what the expectation had been for 2016, and it's very similar. 57% expected an increase, 50% actually got one. How about for the next year? Over 60% of business owners are saying that they expect increases next year. That's about a 5% increase on the same question last year, and it is approaching the peak level here. That was in 2014 when 60% actually experienced an increase in their business activity levels. So let's hope we can get back there in 2017. Either way, being able to say that 50% of companies saw an increase last year and over 60% won this year, it's pretty positive, and it's a confident story to tell. Again, breaking this down by region, overall you can see a lot of confidence here. In BC, over 60% of companies are saying that business has increased in 2016, up from 55% in 2015, and even higher in 2014. Looking ahead, almost 70% expecting improvement in 2017, so it's looking excellent in BC. In Ontario, 57% saying they expect increases in 2017, up from 51% saying that the previous year. Almost 70% of Ontario is feeling good about next year. In Quebec, similar. 55% saw improvements last year and a steady improvement over the previous 2 years. Again, 70% expecting next year to be even better. So outside of Alberta, 70% of employers are saying they expect business activity levels to increase. Now let's focus on the outlier, Alberta. In the top left, you can see that 2015 was the impact year. 50% were seeing a slowdown. In 2016, that has changed. Now only 25% saying things will get worse this year, and over half are saying it's steady going. That was in stark contrast to what people in Alberta actually expected. For the year ahead in Alberta, it's a split decision. Just over 40% saying they will improve, just under 40% saying that's as steady as she goes. Based on this, things are significantly different in Alberta than elsewhere, but improving very much from where they were. Taking a look at how business activity expectations compare specifically within IT, IT activity was fairly close to the overall results, with slightly less than half seeing an increase. More IT leaders saw activity staying the same, and less saw a decrease in comparison with their cross-industry partners. Looking ahead, the IT leaders are a bit more optimistic, with 64% expecting an increase, but also a bit more cautious, since 14% expect a decrease. That's opposed to the 10% for the cross-industry average. At the ground level, what we're seeing as a recruitment company is that IT markets across the country are very, very busy. We asked employers about how the oil and gas downturn is or has affected them. 38% of employers say the downturn affected their economic outlook in a negative way. That is a very significant proportion. Looking at just IT, leaders saw fairly little impact, with only 17% saying it affected their business activity. And of those affected, 3/4 were outside of Alberta, which shows that, so while the worst of the downturn was felt in Alberta, it certainly wasn't exclusively there. So which industries are doing well across Canada? We asked the strongest performing sectors, and it's really not surprising that banking, construction, and IT or telco were the top three. Public sector is there. It's not really surprising that it's that strong, as we're seeing some significant investment from the Liberal governments, federally and provincially. And then finally, pharma or life sciences is one of the most optimistic sectors, with a lot of pharma employers saying that activity will increase next year. But what does this actually mean for hiring? Let's take a look at recruitment trends a little bit closer. Starting with permanent hiring plans. 35% of people expected headcount to increase in 2016, and 15% said it would decrease. When we asked them about how 2016 actually turned out, 31% said that it did increase. So pretty close, but far more than expected. 29% actually had a decrease in headcount. In 2017, you can see that expectations are similar, maybe a little more optimistic than last year. So if the outcomes are also similar, we'll see a few more people growing or maintaining headcount, but probably still about a quarter decreasing. The interesting thing here is the consistency. For 4 years, we've got about the same percentage, 35% of employers adding permanent headcount. That's amidst significant changes in economic confidence and changes on business activity levels. So what is happening here? I would guess it's one of two things. Since 2008, there has not been a prolonged period of economic confidence, growth, or stability. If it isn't one thing going wrong, it's a number. This time it's the oil price, next time it could be NAFTA, who knows? We believe that Canadian employers are cautious because of this. Secondly, it's good business decision making from Canadian business leaders. If things are looking up, it's an opportunity to improve productivity and profit margins. Plus, when things turn down a little, you haven't overinvested, so you don't have to make major cuts. It's a canniness, if you like, and I would say it's working pretty well. Once we have another couple years of steady growth, it will be interesting to see if hiring picks up a bit, maybe getting over that 35% line again. Final point on permanent hiring. What this graph doesn't say is that employers are targeting their hiring on very specific skill sets. I would go so far as to say that every single company is hiring for something right now. And by that I mean, if they see, for example, a senior Java developer with 7 to 10 years of cross-industry experience, then they'll hire them regardless of what's happening, as these are hard to find individuals. Regional trends look very similar, steady year on year, except Alberta again, which isn't surprising. BC and Quebec are most confident in increasing headcount, while employers in Ontario are expecting to keep this steady. So going region by region, every year, BC in the top left is incredibly steady and positive, 40% adding more people. While economic confidence took a bit of a hit last year, it really didn't impact hiring at all. For 2017, it's looking more positive. Then in Alberta, you can see that almost 50% of employers have had to reduce permanent staff numbers. That was worse than the previous year, which was 45%. Looking ahead, most employers in Alberta are hoping to keep headcount steady. Whether that is or whether that will actually happen or not shall remain to be seen, but you'd say with the change in economic confidence and business activity levels, it does look like the worst is behind them. In the bottom left, you can see that Ontario is planning to keep headcounts largely steady, again following a pattern that has been remarkably consistent for the past 3 years. For 2017, mostly saying that it looks like it'll hold steady. And then finally in Quebec in the bottom right, they've seen a bit of a fluctuation in the last few years and actually saw fewer companies decrease numbers last year compared to 2015. Looking ahead, they are almost as confident as BC, with half planning to increase permanent staff numbers. Well, we see that IT employers are expecting to do more hiring than the cross-industry average, and less expect their numbers to stay the same. However, when comparing those numbers to what happened in IT in the previous year, we see that increased headcount is expected to be the same, and the big jump is in the amount of employers who expect to see a decrease. Most employers are hopeful that their staff will remain the same this coming year. We saw a third with an increase, which might be the result of more professionals deciding to move to contract work. It's obviously very lucrative in IT and becoming more and more popular. Looking at contract hiring, that very high orange bar indicates that most employers expect to continue to use temps kind of consistent with last year. Very few are decreasing, and less than 1/5 increasing temporary or contractor headcount. About 55% of employers say they do use contract workers, and this has increased over the last 5 years consistently. So more companies are moving towards the usage of contractors, but many are planning to just kind of keep it at the same level. We can see here that the IT sector also expects their contract hiring practices to stay fairly similar in the coming year. It's interesting that employers don't expect an increase in contract hiring since there was such a decrease in headcount last year. It could be that employers recognize the skill shortage in IT professionals and expect the pool of contract workers is already small. They won't be able to increase hiring even if they wanted to. Just speculation, but something to consider. So now looking at the skills shortage and how the talent mismatch in Canada is actually affecting business. I find that the skills shortage is something that many hiring managers come across when looking for IT professionals in any area. Over 58% say that Canada has a skills shortage, which is not really that high. We see a considerable difference, though, when looking at how the skills shortage directly affects industries, since 67% overall say it does. But employers in IT specifically, we see that 70% say yes, it is affecting me. We did see a bit of a drop in the number of people saying there was a skills shortage, which may be due to the oil and gas downturn. When we asked employers whether the downturn had affected their hiring, 25%, so a quarter, said they've been able to hire much faster due to the downturn. Looking at the cross-industry numbers, we asked about the main reason for the skills shortage, and you can see here there have been some slight changes from last year in what the perception is. Slightly more employers are blaming things like people not entering the industry, people relocating, and then people leaving the industry. The Hayes Global Skills Index highlighted the talent mismatch as a serious concern in Canada. We have the people, but the people don't have the skills. The index recommendations include implementing targeted training as well as improving mobility between industries, so breaking down some of the barriers that keep people from changing jobs or industries or functions. The lack of training and professional development remains the biggest concern, and investing in this will take input from employers, from government, from industry groups, and educational institutions. We're going to look more at this in a minute. So what is in highest demand in IT? These are some of the skills that we're seeing the most demand for. So senior software developers, cybersecurity experts, front-end professionals, mobile developers, and DevOps engineers. These aren't the only areas of demand, of course. There's lots of shortages. These are some of the critical areas as a recruitment company that we're seeing. Personally, the biggest demand that I'm seeing is in security and front-end development. You've got senior execs focused on ensuring their networks or their data are all secure, and almost all organizations are looking to do a better job of engaging with their target audiences to ensure that all of their users' experience, both internal and external, are optimized. So in this skill-short market, how are employers attracting talent? We asked, what are you doing to attract talent? The number one answer was offering competitive salaries. But I think I say this every year, which is that meeting market rate is important, but only one company can pay the top dollar. So you have to be able to compete on other things. The two least common attraction tools are promoting career progression and training and development, even though these are considered very important for both recruitment and retention. In fact, when we ask what employers' main retention challenges are, employers say their biggest challenge is career progression. This is followed by a competitive market, so i.e. how they keep their competitors from poaching their top talent. Then lastly, salaries come in third. Everything else kind of drops off a bit from there. So people are leaving jobs because they aren't getting career progression, and the people leaving for that reason are likely your best because they're the ambitious, competitive group who your competitors are looking for. So are you doing enough to actually keep them? Well, 64% don't have or don't know if they have a succession plan. That's 1/3 who do, which is actually 10% more than last year, and 20% are also in the process of implementing. So some people are taking this seriously. However, when we look at the IT sector, we see it's even worse. 77% are missing out on a succession plan, showing that this industry is even less prepared than the general market. If you don't have a succession plan or aren't putting one in place, then it's unlikely you'll be able to provide that long-term career progression opportunity that is required for retaining the high potential employees, those 10% who are making the biggest difference day to day and who should be your future leaders. So how do we address less people entering the industry? If you look at that kind of donut-shaped chart on the right, the biggest segments represent lack of awareness in university and college and the industry's perception or stereotype. So those are both an issue of people either not knowing about the industry at all or having some serious misconceptions about it. If you combine the lack of awareness in university with the dark blue segment representing the lack of awareness in grade school, then more than 1/3 of employers say young people are not learning about their industry in that stage of life when it's critical as they start to think about their careers. So what can we do about this? We asked who is responsible for tackling the issue of too few people joining the industry, and 35% of employers say they are responsible for addressing this. I think this is promising as a lot of employers are taking the responsibility on themselves. The remaining 65% spread responsibility elsewhere, and it's across the government, educational bodies, and industry groups. I do think this is an issue that needs a combined effort to address. The Hayes Global Skills Index showed that Canada's education system is inflexible, meaning it can't adapt quickly to new skill demands, and I would have to agree. So government and educators must combine their efforts and create more agile education programs that prepare young people for the workforce, and employers and industry groups must ensure they're communicating their needs with educators and government. So now the crux of the guide. How is all of this affecting salaries? So on this graph, you've got 5 years of salary trends. The dark blue is how many people did not increase salaries. Orange is increased by 3% or less, and the light blue is increased by more than 3%. The short version of the slide is more and more companies are taking a conservative approach. The trends are more companies each year are offering 0 increases, more companies each year offering a less than 3% increase, and less companies each year offering greater than a 3% increase. So if we look at the light blue bars, you can see that since 2013, it's gone down from more than 40% offering more than 3% in 2013 to just 27% last year and under 20% saying it for this year. That's quite a trend. And then the dark blue bar, in 2013, 15% of companies said no increase this year. And in 2016, that became a far more prevalent concept with 25% saying no increase. The orange bar represents companies saying yes to an increase, but keeping it below 3%. And that is easily the most common approach. Again, since 2013, there is a trend towards this approach. Around 45% are offering this in 2013, and 55% saying it's their plan this year. So over the last 5 years, we have seen more companies offering either no increase or less than 3%. Against the backdrop of increases and decreases in confidence in business activity, such a clear trend may look a little at odds. How come this isn't changing with the ups and downs of the economy? I'd say it is for the exact same reasons that we're not seeing the hiring change. We haven't seen a few years of consistent economic growth across the country and across industries for about 10 years now. So people are cautious. I think it's as simple as that. Another angle could be almost 20% of companies said they were able to offer lower than usual compensation, and that's just due to the economic downturn. So this is reducing pressure to increase in some areas or industries. Anyways, bad news for your pocket for sure, but let's finish on a positive note and say that 81% say they will increase salaries next year, and also point out that less companies are planning a 0 change for the coming year. To attract talent, IT employers were more likely to give raises to their staff, which we can see by the 30% who said they raised salaries by more than 3%. Next year, a third planned to increase salaries by more than 3%, and less expect to not increase salaries at all. Employers are trying to keep up with the market to get IT professionals, and it's such a small pool of candidates. I think we've got IT unemployment sitting around 3% right now. The previous slide was a bit of a catch-all, plans that kind of catch every employee. We wanted to see if companies are using a 2-speed approach to salaries and asked whether they are willing to change compensation plans to attract top talent. So in that dark blue wedge, you can see that 20% of employers say yes, we have done that. Another, almost 5%, are saying that they plan to do so in the coming year, and another 38% saying they haven't done so, but they're willing to do it. That's a total of 64% saying they would or are willing to change their salary plans in order to attract the right talent. This is similar to the approach in hiring. Overall conservative, but when it comes to specific skill sets, a very different and more aggressive approach. Looking at the chart below, the gray and blue shows where people are feeling wage pressure, so you can see it's its highest at that mid to senior level. Overall, more than 60% are feeling at least some wage pressure at these levels, and almost as many say they're experiencing it at the director level and above. So I would predict that we see employers giving really targeted compensation increases to the employees who are the most important to retain. It's back to that 10% who drive results and who you identify as future leaders of the department or the company. Now, does that align with what people are actually expecting? 2/3 of people are saying they expect to get a salary increase next year. This number doesn't really change much year on year. Last year it was about 68%. But only just over half actually got a pay increase. So that expectation was not met. I don't think everyone needs to get a pay rise every year, but if you're not increasing salaries, then you need to be communicating with employees about why that is and try and avoid that lunch bag letdown and look at other areas of improvement such as benefits. And that leads us to, what are you missing from your benefits plan? Looking at benefits now, we've talked a lot about targeted attraction, and I think your benefits package is one of the best ways that your organization can stand out. We asked employees this time what benefits were the most valuable to them, and these are the top 5. It's vacation, performance bonuses, pension and RRSP support, training and development, and flexible work hours. The top benefit is always vacation. We know from experience that more vacation time is really the only benefit that will allow a candidate to accept a lower salary. Anyway, these represent opportunities for you to stand out and offer candidates what they actually want. But how many employers are actually offering these? Only 56% of employers offer more than 2 weeks to new hires. Just half of employers offer bonuses. 52% offer pension or RRSP support. We've already talked about the importance of training and development, and yet only 47% of employers are including it in their package. Finally, flexible work, only 49% of employers are offering this. So these are all opportunities. If you can offer more of these, then you're doing better than your competitors. Now let's look at what employers are planning for next year. These are the benefits that employers are planning to add next year. They're fairly small in numbers. About 5% of employers plan to add flexible work options. However, it doesn't show that employers are looking for different ways to differentiate. What I think is most interesting is that this list really resembles the one above. So employers know what is valuable to candidates, but there is one big missing piece. Training and development support is not in the top 5. It's actually not even the top 10 of what employers are planning to add next year. Less than 2% of employers say they're adding this to attract or retain talent. So if you're not training to get the skills that you need, and you're not training to address productivity issues, and you don't include training in your benefits as a recruitment and retention tool, then you're really missing out on a very important opportunity. I think one barrier is that people see training as an expensive exercise, but it doesn't have to be. You can bring in an external trainer for half a day, or organize lunch and learns, or set up internal mentorship programs to help pass that knowledge on. You can offer time off to your employees to pursue their own studies, or invest in memberships to online training programs. There are a lot of ways that you can offer training no matter what your company size or budget, but you need some sort of response to this. So that's the larger picture. Now, what is the summary? We'll start with our key findings. Confidence in the economy is improving. Employers outside of Alberta are optimistic for future business activity. Alberta is hoping for modest improvement. Employers are using contingent or contract workers to manage workloads, but they don't have full visibility on those resources. Skills shortages are top of employer concerns, and most are focused on compensation and benefits to attract talent. Salary increases of greater than 3% persist, and employers are targeting increases to get and keep the best talent. So some recommendations. These are the top 5 that we think will help you and your team succeed this year. Target hiring to the roles that will make the biggest difference, but monitor workloads to ensure key staff are not overburdened. Keep up with market salaries, and if you can't compete, offer other benefits to buffer your lower compensation. Add training as a benefit to engage and retain high potential employees and to grow your own experts. Engage your developers to innovate and push boundaries. This will be a good retention tool for ambitious developers, and you can find new products or solutions. It certainly works for Google. Create a talent pipeline, even if you're not currently hiring, by developing your employer brand online. Okay, that's it for the key messages we wanted to share today. Thank you very much for dialing in and listening. I hope you found it useful and that you got at least 1 or 2 constructive ideas from it. We now have a couple of minutes to spare, and I can answer any questions that you have. If you do have a question, you can type it in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to it. We do have Chris David, as I mentioned earlier, with us today. He's one of our IT specialists from the Alberta market, and he would be pleased to address any local questions. As mentioned, he also is an expert in the security side of things. The soft copy of the salary guide will be available on January 16th, and we can send you a copy by email. If you'd like a hard copy, feel free to reach out to your local Hayes office with the request. We'll also have a recording of this webinar available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So let's see what questions we have. Okay, I've got one here. It's hard to compete with the bigger companies with bigger budgets. How can we differentiate from the big names to get really good candidates? To be honest, in my experience, I think that's a bit of a misconception. It tends to be the larger organizations offer actually lower salaries. There might be nicer extras, but I would focus on the environment. Larger companies, like banks or insurance companies, aren't able to create that kind of cool or hip IT environment that the millennial crowd specifically is going after. So I would look internally at the culture, but then obviously looking at the training. You're likely in a position that you could be a little bit more agile in implementing specific training for specific roles than it would take at a bank, which is more a bureaucratic sort of environment. I've got one here on IT security. Chris, can you see that one?
Can you hear me, Travis?
Yeah, I can hear you, Chris. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I believe I've got the one here. Okay, so hiring IT security professionals has been difficult. What should we do as an organization to find them? How can we get them on board, and how can we retain them? I think that's actually a really relevant question. There has been a huge cybersecurity skill shortage. It is a very candidate short market. Basically, when I speak to these candidates on a day-to-day basis, they look for a company, and you really hit the nail on the head. It's all about professional development, because IT security is an ever-changing industry, and it's changing so fast that these individuals do really value support for getting certifications, designations, and training to be better at their jobs. But not only that, they want to be in organizations that they feel there's executive buy-in into these security programs, and that they will have the resources and support to successfully perform their jobs. I'd have to say one other thing is just to have realistic expectations when you're looking for these individuals. Not one security professional is going to really tick every box. There's 10 domains of security. You will rarely find someone that can meet all of those without supplemental professional services and support. How to find them? Well, we wouldn't want to give away our secret recipe at Hayes, but we'd advise clients to really get into industry events, networking events, really target use their marketing efforts, using social media, job boards, advertise, and even look at training internal candidates, because there might be some applicable skill sets within that you could develop. But, you know, I guess lastly, you could hire us to find them. I think that kind of answers all those questions. I think lastly for retention, or I didn't really address the retention. I think all of those things that you mentioned in the back or in the past slides about, you know, training, offering competitive salaries, giving career progression is probably the best way to keep these individuals on board.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have another question here. What is the range of salary for a technical customer support representative? It's one of those job titles that is kind of interchangeable: help desk, desk side, technical customer support. It's a tough one to answer without knowing what level or what environment or what industry that you're in. But in general, I would say that it's going to go anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 for a level 3 or a team lead in that environment. But again, it really depends on your definition of technical. We've got another one here. We are reviewing our current IT function to keep up with new tech. You've talked a lot about training, but it would be a lot of training required for some roles. When do you recommend recruiting new talent versus training existing people? It's definitely a cash decision. One thing that I would look at is kind of the long-term roadmap for your IT department. If you plan to do refreshes on your routers every year and you've got insane amounts of money to spend, then I'd say don't worry about talent, or training rather. Bring in a contractor each year. But if you're the type of organization that you make a decision, you stick with it, these are our servers, we're going to have them for the next 10 years, then I definitely say invest in the training, get your current staff up to speed, and then hopefully you can keep them for kind of as long as possible. Unless I'll give it another few seconds if there's any other questions coming in. I don't see anything else. Look, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you very much. Again, if you'd like a copy of the guide, you can call any Hayes office. You can email me. My address is right there on the screen. Everyone who did attend, we will email you out a copy on January 16th, but the physical versions are available today. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day. Take care, everybody.